Okay, so we want to try and stay very much to time. I'd like to welcome everybody all here on the first of what I hope is going to be a series of Simon Talks over the next period. Today, we want to look at sort of our ongoing considerations around what homeless services in Ireland, or more particularly homeless policy in Ireland, is going to look like in the post-COVID period. So our speakers today are Claire Burke from the CSO and Bo Heidi Jockinson, who is from Denmark and a Danish NGO called Project Udenfor, which is Project Outside. I'll let Bo introduce himself shortly. Just to frame why our considerations for being here today, most people will know there's been a really welcome reduction in the number of people in homeless services in Ireland over the last couple of months, even in the context of the COVID crisis. And that's a testimony, firstly, to really good collaborative work that's been going on the front line between local authorities, NGOs like Simon and the HSE, where we've managed to maintain move on, even in the context of the COVID crisis. And I think it's a real achievement. But also a big contributing factor to the reduction in the number of people in homelessness has been the prevention of people coming into homelessness in the first instance. And that's been facilitated by some good preventive work that's happening on the ground, but also particularly the restrictions that were placed on rent increases and a moratorium on evictions that happened, brought in legislatively by the government. So the reduction in the number of people is in part really good work that's been maintaining move on, but also critically the prevention of move on. And that prevention is something that we would see periodically in homeless services, particularly around the December period, when because of the time of the year, you see people are less likely to be evicted. You see families taking people in for short periods, even maybe out of homelessness for short periods. And our concern is that as we unwind the COVID restrictions, we might see an increase in homelessness again. Coupled with that kind of natural flow, there's also the concern of the impact of COVID on families and individuals. We've seen a report today about the increase in the reporting of domestic violence. We know from our research that people enter homelessness the two main reasons are people losing their accommodation in private rented, and also family breakup. Contributing factors are also things like mental health, addiction, and loss of income. Those three in particular seem to be an aspect of the COVID crisis. So that isn't to say that any one of those things is the sole reason why someone would experience homelessness. But what we do know is when they can be contributing factors, and as that pressure, if that pressure is increasing in society, we're more likely to see people perhaps end up in homelessness unless we can increase our preventative structures, increase our preventative supports. And how do we sort of starting to think about how do we do that and make sure we keep the momentum that we've built up over the period of the COVID crisis is going to be really important. So that in part is why we've invited Claire Burke to be with us today. Claire is worked as a statistician in the Central Statistics Office since 2005. She works in the Income, Consumption and Wealth Division. She was involved, which relates to today, in the questionnaire development and data analysis of the social impact of COVID-19 survey study, which was conducted only in April of 2020. And the survey focused on personal well-being, concerns around the impact of COVID-19 and changes in consumption since the introduction of COVID-19. So what we're hoping is that Claire will give us a sense of the kind of the social impact of COVID, and then it's for us to sort of think about how that's going to impact on our services and how we need to respond to it. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Wayne. Can you see that? Okay, today I'm going to speak about the social impact of COVID-19 survey that was conducted by the Central Statistics Office in April of this year. I must point out that there is an age-based bulletin being released tomorrow at 11 a.m. which may be of interest to you, so please look out for that. The social impact of COVID-19 survey was undertaken in April 2020 to measure the impact of COVID-19 has had on Irish society. The survey covers topics including well-being, personal concerns, consumption and working life. Please note, however, that this was a household-based survey and that was conducted primarily by electronic questionnaire and by telephone interviewing, and as a result it excludes a certain cohort of society. Significantly, the well-being of respondents is measured in April 2020 during the COVID-19 restriction and is compared with well-being statistics that were collected by the Survey of Income and Living Conditions at significant periods in Irish society. That is in 2013 when Ireland was suffering the effects of the 2008 financial crisis, and in 2018, a time when the Irish economy was growing strongly. So, well-being. Respondents aged 18 to 34 were the least likely to report high overall life satisfaction, and they had the largest decrease across all age groups between 2018 and April 2020, decreasing by almost 80% from 48.8% to 10.2%. Those aged 18 to 34 saw the largest decrease in satisfaction with personal relationships, falling from a mean score of 8.7 in 2018 to 7.2 in April 2020. While almost 3 in 5 respondents aged 18 to 34 gave a high satisfaction rating for personal relationships in 2013 and 2018, this fell to under 2 in 5 in April 2020. Respondents were asked about their perceived ability to access non-material help from other people. Access to non-material help relates to having someone to discuss matters with or getting help with doing something. Male respondents were more likely to report not having access to non-material. Yes?
Sorry, you need to, your screen hasn't shared. I think you were, did you?
Sorry, am I talking to myself? Or am I just showing myself? Let me see. Let me see. Share screen. No. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's
it.
Sorry
about that. Is that okay?
That's perfect. Thanks, Claire.
Sorry about that. So I'll just start. Respondents were asked about their perceived ability to access non-material help from other people. Access to non-material help relates to having someone to discuss matters with or getting help with doing something. So as I said, male respondents were more likely to report not having access to non-material help than females, 15.2% compared with 12.6% in April 2020, with both showing an increase on 2018 figures. So that's, they have increased. They felt that more people felt that they could not access non-material help since 2018. The share of respondents aged 18 to 34 who felt they could not access non-material help in April 2020 was over 4 times higher than the corresponding figure in 2018, increasing from 3.4% in 2018 to 16% in 2020. So looking at emotional well-being, the 18 to 34-year-old age group were most likely to feel nervous, downhearted or depressed or lonely at least some of the time in the 4-week period prior to interview in April 2020. In 2018, just under 2/3 of respondents aged 18 to 34 said that they felt lonely none of the time in the 4 weeks prior to interview. This figure has decreased to 1 in 4 in April 2020. Looking at household stress from confinement, respondents living in multiple person households were more likely to be very concerned about household stress from confinement if they were living in rented accommodation or if there was 1 room or less per person. In comparison, 15% of respondents living in owner-occupied dwellings and over 16% of those living in households with more than 1 room per person were very concerned about household stress from confinement. Respondents living in an apartment, flat or bedsit had the highest proportion for being very concerned about household stress from confinement at 20% when compared to respondents in other dwellings. Looking at violence in the home, the majority, 94% of respondents were not at all concerned about violence in the home. However, 6% were somewhat or very concerned. The gender breakdown shows no significant difference between males and females. This 5.8% for males and 6.2% of females were somewhat or very concerned about violence in the home. However, due to relatively small sample sizes for respondents who were concerned about violence in the home, it wasn't possible to provide further demographical breakdown estimates for this cohort. Looking at the financial impact of COVID-19 on younger adults, in the social impact of COVID-19 survey, respondents were asked to rate the impact COVID-19 had had on their household's ability to meet their financial obligations. The highest rate for negative financial impact were among those aged 18 to 34 at 41.9%. The CSO also conducted a separate survey called the Employment and Life Effects of COVID-19 survey. And this reported that of those whose employment was affected by COVID-19, 15 to 24-year-olds experienced the highest rate of loss of employment and temporary layoff, with 46% of 15 to 24-year-olds being temporarily laid off, and over a fifth experiencing loss of employment. 15% of 25 to 34-year-olds were laid off, and 39% were temporarily laid off. Looking at changes in alcohol consumption since the restrictions of COVID-19 were set in place, the percentage of male and female respondents report an increase in their consumption of alcohol since the introduction of restrictions were very similar, 20.9% and 23.4%. Over 30% of respondents in both the 18 to 34 and 35 to 44 age groups reported an increase in their alcohol consumption. More than a third of respondents that were unemployed prior to and since COVID-19 crisis reported an increase in alcohol consumption, whereas just 1 in 4, 26% of respondents employed and currently engaged in work duties said that their consumption had increased. 1/3 of respondents, with 1/3 of respondents without access to non-material help reported an increase in alcohol consumption compared with 1/5 of respondents with access to non-material help. More than 4 in 10 respondents that were very concerned about household stress from confinement reported an increase in alcohol consumption, compared with approximately 2 in 10 respondents that were not at all or somewhat concerned. And also, I omitted on the slide there that respondents with low well-being scores had higher increases in alcohol consumption. So respondents that felt very nervous, downhearted or depressed or lonely at least some of the time over the past 4 weeks reported an increase in alcohol consumption, and they were all approximately 30%. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Claire. It was really concise, but really captured, I think, a lot of the pressures that we expected to see, and that we're seeing, that kind of feed into the concerns that Simon would have around that increasing hidden homelessness issue. I'd ask all the attendees, feel free to start typing in your questions. We're going to hold all questions to the end. But if you have a question in mind, do type it out and we'll try and get through as many of them as we can. But for now, I'm going to thank Claire, and I'm going to invite our next speaker, who, as I mentioned, is Bo Heidi Jochimsen. And the reason why I asked Bo to speak to us today was Denmark is a country of a similar size to Ireland. They also have been very successful in keeping the number of COVID cases in the homeless population very low. But they're also particularly, in Denmark, they've started to unwind the lockdown restrictions in the middle of April. So they're about 8 weeks ahead of us. And I thought, although it's very early, it's still 8 weeks ahead of us, and perhaps there is some learning that Bo can share with us that perhaps will help us to think about that process that we're about to enter into of lockdown and its impact on homelessness and homeless services. So just to give me a quick introduction, Bo is General Manager of Project Utenfor. And he began working with Project Utenfor in 2006, and I think he's worked his way up from an outreach worker to head of services to now the General Manager. And he was appointed only last year in 2019. He's also a member of the Executive Council of FIANSA, which is the European Federation of National Organizations working with the homeless, and the only European NGO working specifically on homeless issues. So I'm delighted to welcome Bo to speak to us today.
Thank you very much. And I will do it like this. Okay, I will start from the beginning. Well, I will say, 1 minute, please. Yes, we have it here. When the coronavirus hit Denmark, like most of the other countries, when it started, everybody was filled with this fear, and we were afraid that the homeless people were getting hit very hard, and because of their physical standard and stuff like that. So from the beginning, everybody was afraid that there would be a big population of the homeless people who would get the coronavirus. So from day one, a new thing in Denmark was that the politician on national level, they were very reaching out for the NGOs and for everybody who were working with homeless and asking about solutions. But they're not only asking, they also put out a lot of money. So and that was something new. I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Denmark, normally if the NGOs go out and say, we see this problem in the homeless community, then it would take a couple of years and we don't get so much money as we used to. So in the start, it was like on national level, they said, okay, we got to find a solution. What can we do? And also on regional, in the big cities of Denmark, it started really quick with the social mayor of Copenhagen called me and said, what can we do? We found a solution. We needed to find places where the homeless can get in a quarantine. We need to get them checked. We need all that kind of stuff. We need beds to get them in. So in 1 or 2 weeks, we had a lot of new places where they can sleep. We had enough mobile testing, so all the homeless people get tested. We got places where they can get in quarantine when there was. So everybody was motivated to do a lot that we couldn't do on a normal basis. After a couple of weeks, the fear was gone because we had tested a lot of the homeless, and there were not many of the homeless people who had the coronavirus. But instead of stopping there and say, okay, we have no problem, we kept on doing the same. We kept on finding new solutions to get the homeless people away from the streets and could work with them. In the same period, there was also the funding in Denmark. They were also reaching out and say, what can we do to help with this coronavirus and the homeless environment? Do we find some solution, not only money, but also places where they can sleep, foreign people who could get home if they wanted, stuff like that. And the reason why I will start here is it's very important for me to say that a lot of the things we have done in Denmark under the coronavirus crisis are things that we would like to do for many years. Ultimate housing first, getting people away from the streets so we can work with them, having a quick way into the hospitals and stuff like that. But also that all the media and the politicians on both sides are working together to find solutions instead of saying, yeah. So that was very positive. I know the corona crisis is not a good thing, but some of the things that happened on the corona crisis in Denmark were pretty good, and things that we were not able to do before the coronavirus the crisis. So where are we now? We are there now that everybody in the homeless community in Denmark, they could see we could work together. There are money, and we don't have to wait so long. If we have a good idea, let's do it. It's working. Also, some of the numbers are not so precise that we saw before, but we can see that around 70% of the homeless, they get away from the streets in a couple of weeks and get inside. Some in shelters, some in the apartments that they normally could not stay in, or some at families. We also took some of the people who were in this condition where they couldn't be together with other people because of their what can you say, physical, mentally illness and stuff. Like, we put them on hotels, and we find all kind of solutions. So we get to now almost no homeless people on the streets after 2 weeks, and it was a pretty amazing thing, because I think a lot of people in Denmark, they will say that the problem is not so big, so let's do something about it. But before the Corona crisis, it wasn't so easy. Another thing that we find out under the crisis is that everybody could work together. And again, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Denmark, sometimes it can be difficult because some people work with a religious background, or some work for the state and stuff like that. But under the Corona crisis, there are no problems with working together. Everybody were interested in finding solutions. So, and if we look at where are we now, we are, what did you say, Wayne? Maybe a couple of weeks, 8 weeks in front of you, and we started to open up, and we don't see what we say, a lot of homeless people getting coronavirus, but we see a lot of homeless people coming back on the streets. We see that the people who maybe managed to stay some kind of inside or staying at the shelters for a while, they are now getting back on the streets. But still, some of the things that the new shelters or the places where you can come in quarantine, stuff like that, they are still there. There are still food on the street and stuff like that. So what I hope more generally for the future is that now you can't say in Denmark, oh, we can't do it because there's no money, or we can't work together, because under the crisis we could see almost everything was possible, and a lot of people went out of the homelessness. Some people will say, okay, what now? Do we have to go back to normal? No, I think we should not go back to normal. We should learn from this, and then we should take the best part out of it. And I think, again, working together was one thing, but I have been, even though I've been worked in this field for 15 years, for me it has been very positive that even some of the hardest, rough sleeping people with most problems, who have been out there for so many years, if they got some solution to get inside straight away, Tuesday evening, they said, okay, let's go. You can go with me, a social worker, and find a bed at a hotel, and then we work with you tomorrow. Even some of the people who we are not able to get away from the street for many years, we could help them now. So I'm very positive about, and I think we should, make the housing first. Yeah, sorry, my time is already over. I could talk for a long time. Sorry.
Okay, thanks a million, Bo. That was really good. I think there's clearly a lot of overlap in our experiences. I mean, so if people want to, I think we have questions are starting to come in. So please do keep your questions coming in for either of our panelists, and I will ask them. I suppose just if I can abuse my position as chair, I suppose one of the things you talked about there was that people are starting to return to the street, maybe coming out of the shelters. That it was felt that they felt at the time that the shelter was an appropriate response for them, but they don't feel that anymore. I just wonder, given that experience, as you talked about the housing first analysis, do you feel that it's a place you can build on, that maybe that initial interaction can now be built upon, and if solutions that meet the needs of the person to get them out of homelessness were provided, that we could actually see real progress for you? And a related question, we've seen people transition from maybe emergency accommodation back onto the street, which is actually unwelcome, but has there been any increase in homelessness in terms of new presenters or people over the 8 weeks?
The last first, I haven't seen what we'll say a new group of homeless people coming out now. I haven't seen poor people on the streets in Denmark, or kids or stuff like that we normally don't see. A lot of the people who are back on the streets are people we know from before. And for me, it's very clear that the reason they are back is that the shelter system in Denmark is not working. The only reason they went to the shelter was because the corona crisis was like it was, and everybody had to go inside. As soon as they can go out, they go out. They want their own apartments. They want their own places. Nobody wants to be on these shelters, who has been the same for 50, 60 years. So it's not a good place, but they had to stay. But as soon as they can, they get out. So I would think we should do what we should do now is to say, okay, now we know what is working. Now we know what the homeless people want. If we want to get them out of homelessness, we need to make some housing first instead of the shelter system who's not working.
Okay. So we have another question here from Audra Larkin, who works in drug and alcohol services. And one of the concerns that they're raising is that as we see an increase in perhaps alcohol consumption to do with COVID, or the pressure that's on, and the increase in alcohol consumption, etc. And if people are returning to homelessness, coupled with the increase in alcohol and perhaps drug use during the COVID accommodation, what's the vision going forward, or policy directive regarding temporary accommodation? And is there any plans for retaining the current level of emergency placements available during COVID? That's an Irish question. Now, I think that probably is a concern. I think there is a concern around, there's always a concern, I think, in homeless services around dual diagnosis, and getting people access to the services they need. And I suppose that's very much the cohort that you would be working with, Bo, in Project Uden for. There's the more complex cases, specifically, I suppose, what Project Uden for was set up to address. Did you have any concerns around that? Have you seen, in terms of the COVID period, an increase in issues around addiction that have perhaps contributed to that return to the street?
No, I haven't seen, but I will say it maybe in a different way. What we have seen under the corona crisis, where people were at the shelters, or there were places where they had to be isolated or alone, we also made some new solutions that instead of people could get the medicine for 1 day at a time, they could get for 15 days or 3 weeks. And normally that would be impossible in Denmark, because you will say, oh, then they take all their drugs or their medicine at one and stuff like that. But the opposite happened. People were much more quiet and had a better life, because they knew that they also had their medicine or their drugs or their alcohol tomorrow and the day after. So again, things are turned a little bit around, and a lot of the things we were afraid of were working pretty good. Are people coming back on the street now and drinking more? I don't think so. I don't know. I will always say, I don't think you drink more because you're on the streets. You know, I say there's different things about it. Of course, you can be a part of a group and in a period you drink some more, but that's not my concern, really.
Okay. We have another question here again for Bo. Has there been any increase in domestic violence or in homelessness related to domestic violence in Denmark since COVID, or since the ease of the lockdown? So has that been an impact?
Yeah, that we have a big increase on domestic violence. I don't know if it had something to do with the homeless, but it has something to do that we had the lockdown, and a lot of people had to stay home instead of going out. So we had a huge race in that, where what you call the places where women and their children call for help if there are problems at home. It was so huge, the numbers of people who needed help. So yes.
Okay. And in the Irish context, that would be, we would have a number of refuge services, and so it's, I suppose in the fianza model of the ethos model, you would count those people as experiencing homelessness because they're having to leave home to seek refuge, but they wouldn't necessarily engage always with frontline homeless services, though many do. So you're saying that it's the similar experience in Denmark.
Yeah.
Okay. And Claire, I don't know if there's any, I know you said the population was so small that there wasn't a huge amount you could extrapolate beyond the, frankly, 6% is quite a shocking number, actually, because it is the, it's 1 in 20. Like that people would be very concerned or concerned. Claire, you need to unmute there.
Sorry, yes, our sample size was 1,362. So we couldn't break down further than male, female about for violence in the home.
Okay. But the 6% is still statistically it's valid and very significant. Yeah.
Yeah, but even the numbers of the household stresses for those that the household stress from confinement, they were quite high as well. Was it respondents? Was it 22.4% of those living in rented accommodation or in a accommodation with less than one room said they were very concerned about household stress from confinement. This compares with 16% of those living in larger dwellings as well.
Okay. Another question here again, Bo. In terms of does it appear that the Danish government will cut back on resources for homeless services as you come out of lockdown? Has that discourse begun, or is it?
That's too early to say, because even though we over the work, we have no indication that they will what you call it, take the money back that we spent more. I think it will be more like we go back to normal, but I don't think that they will take the money we spend extra back. I hope that we can keep on in this pace we are doing right now, because it's a good investment for a long time. If we do it, if we keep on doing it right now, I think we get a lot of people out of homelessness. So let's see. We're talking about that right now, and it's always difficult to say what the Danish politician thinks.
Okay. And Claire, I suppose one of the interesting aspects of your work that you pulled out was the impact on 18 to 36-year-olds.
Yes,
and that young cohort. And I suppose when we look at the homeless figures, we said it's the way the age brackets are broken up is slightly different. So it's 18 to 25, or 18 to 24, and then 25 to 44. But that 25 to 44 group are by far and away the large cohort, diverse as that age population is.
yes.
But it does seem that people that is the time in the life cycle when perhaps people are that bit more vulnerable to homelessness, probably for all the sort of reasons we can imagine.
Yeah.
But they do seem to be sort of disproportionately impacted, particularly the younger cohort.
Yeah, well, as I said it before, there's an age bulletin being released tomorrow, which will look specifically at the impact of COVID-19 on younger persons versus older persons. And it does appear that younger persons are the ones that are being more negatively impacted by COVID-19 from all aspects compared to other people, both financially, from an emotional well-being point of view. It is affecting them more than older persons.
Yeah, and I think that has a particular resonance for us as well, particularly around obviously concern around youth homelessness, where we know there tends to be a huge aspect of hidden homelessness within that population as well, because they have the flexibility of sleeping on friends' couches, and it tends to be much more periodic, but can become entrenched.
Yeah.
So that additional pressure is right.
Unfortunately, we couldn't capture the effect of COVID-19 on homeless people or those people that are or sleeping on someone's couch, because it was a household-based survey, and the participants had already participated in the labour force survey and had given their email addresses and their phone numbers and had agreed to participate. So it definitely excluded a certain cohort of society, which you are focusing on today.
Okay. So we're looking for, do we have any more questions coming in there? So, Bo, I should have maybe prepared more questions. I think, as I was saying, the overlap of our experiences seems to be quite strong. In terms of that, so one of the things that a number of NGOs have been saying is that we've managed to maintain the move on. That's really welcome. The prevention has worked really well. And that's seen the number of people in homelessness go down. I'm wondering, one, has the number of people in the overall stats, or are those stats collected regularly enough for you? Have you seen that trend there? And is the sector in Denmark, across the sector, also concerned about that hidden homelessness aspect, that we might see a growth in homelessness into the future as the restrictions unwind with those pressures? And obviously you weren't coming from the same housing crisis situation that we had here in Ireland, so it's a slightly different context in that sense. But I'm just wondering, what's the sense in the sector there?
No, we don't fear that there will be a large number of new homeless after the crisis, because financially, I think we are a different place in Denmark than in Ireland, I will think. So we don't fear. I think the homeless population is maybe the population of the Danish country who has been most tested for the corona, and we had almost no positive tests. And in the start we thought that was pretty good, but I think right now we more think, okay, are the homeless people in Denmark living so isolated from the rest of the community that they don't even get the coronavirus? So I think that is the new thing we're thinking about now. Are they so isolated from the rest of the community that we have to do something else? We also thought about that. Something about 70% of the homeless people, they were away from the streets and inside and getting solution. But the 30% who had the biggest problems, who had drug issues, mental issues, alcohol issues, many of them, they never get in. Even under the corona crisis, or when it's winter, or when it's holidays, stuff like that. And a lot of them, it took them weeks or maybe months for they even understood that we had a big crisis. So I think for the people who have it worst in Denmark, who are most isolated, this is an eye opener for us who are working with them.
And what do you feel? Where does that? Where's the thinking then migrating in that context in terms of the responses to homelessness?
I think we should. I hope that we look at it and say, okay, for 70% of the homeless population in Denmark, it's not very difficult to get them out of homelessness. It's about housing first. It's about money. It's about flexible systems, and then we can do it pretty quick. But I think we have to think about what we do with the people with most problems, the people who need most help, because even under the corona crisis, where everything was possible, it was difficult to get them out of the homelessness. So I hope that we maybe turn it around and say, instead of spending all the money and all the time on the 70% who probably would get out of homelessness if we find a cheap apartment for them, let's focus on the 30% who have big problems and issues, and let's see how we can solve that.
Okay. I think that's a.
I know it wasn't the answer to your questions. I know it wasn't the directly answer to your questions, but it's my thoughts about how what we have learned.
I think it's very in keeping with the Irish policy and the movement towards a housing first policy here. I think chimes very closely with that experience, and certainly we recognise that what we want to do is keep people out of homelessness wherever we can. We want to provide those really excellent services, and I think one of the things that we've learned over the period of the COVID crisis has been the increased capacity that has allowed people to social distance has also increased, and keeping people safe has also increased the level of engagement that was possible. And that's really important and something that we really want to hold on to over the coming weeks and months and years. I think we might wrap up now. So I'll just do either Claire or Bo have any final points they want to make or any final comments?
Nope.
No, we're all good. Okay, so can I thank all my attendees for being here? We'll wrap up now. I want to thank my two presenters, Claire and Bo, two really good presentations. I think offers a different worldview to us over and above what we would usually see. And I think we're also getting a thank you here. I see from a number of people here. In particular, thank you from Galway Simon, who are in attendance today, and all my colleagues across Simon and all my colleagues across the sector, and the number of politicians who took the time to also attend. It's really welcome that people are engaging and taking the time to think about, to come with us and think about these really important topics. And thank you, Bo. I know this is a really important time and busy time for yourself, and I know for Claire as well, who has not only a new report coming out tomorrow, but a new phase of the
yes, we're launching the second wave of the social impact of COVID-19 survey. I think it's going into the field tomorrow. So that will be in the field for a week, and we will be publishing at the end of the month again. So it'll be in relation to comfort levels with the easing of restrictions of COVID-19 and what people are we'll have a sense of what people are comfortable actually doing, going to the pub or the restaurant and keeping social distancing, and what level of social distancing they're comfortable with. So it'll be extremely interesting and give an insight to how people are truly feeling.
And I think that's all really valuable. I mean, one of the things, as we wrap up, I suppose one of the things that's really important is there's a lot of research across a number of different organizations happening at the moment. And I think while that affords us an opportunity to come together and really pool our collective resources to particularly the work that's going on in the social sphere, but also the economic, to make sure we're putting in place the sort of preventative and protective measures that are needed. Okay, so again, thank you to you all, and we'll wrap up there. We're exactly on time, which is excellent. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much.